Everybody, so today we're going to make something called maple ginger salmon. So it's got maple and ginger and some other things, but the main ingredients that for the salmon. So I want to take a look at salmon fillet that you can buy at the store. I always buy it with the skin on because there's a layer of fat between the skin and the salmon that you want rendered into the salmon when you cook it, and it gives it just nice texture, and it's better for you, I guess, too. You'll notice the salmon here has, when you go to the top of the fish down to the tail, it goes from a thicker fillet down to a thinner fillet. So when I cut the portions, I want to consider that, because in my cooking process, we want to make sure that we cook the tail piece a little bit less so that it doesn't dry out when we cook the rest of it together. We're going to use a technique where we use a searing of the salmon first, so on the top and the bottom, and then we'll put it in the oven to finish it off. So let's try the portions here. As you can tell, what I'm doing is I'm going to, like I said, cut off the tail piece first, because that piece will be separately cooked from the rest of it, or at least cooked in a different for a different duration. So it's a thinner piece like that, And then this piece here we're going to cut into portions. So I'm going to do 3 portions today for this piece. If it was a bigger piece, we'd go with maybe 4 typically. That's a little bit of a smaller piece of salmon fillet. My knife isn't quite as sharp as I'd like it to be. That's 1, 2, 3. And the other thing I want to show you is that at the top of the salmon, usually it's a little bit wider too. There's like a wider piece to it here. Leave that on there. It has some good fat, again, content in it. So we want to do that. Wish I had a sharper knife. Okay, so there are my portions. You'll see what I have. I have a cookie sheet with a silicone liner. Now, I love using that because then your cookie sheet doesn't get trashed. Okay, the next thing I wanted to do is talk about what we put on this. So we're going to use dill. So this would be dried dill, and we're going to be sprinkling that on. We're going to have some lemon, because we'll use some lemon rind on top, and our trusty maple syrup, Canadian maple syrup right here, and a frozen ginger root. Okay, so I put the ginger root in the freezer. So you take a piece of ginger root out, a piece like that. There's no need to peel it. That's the ginger root there. It's frozen. And here's my grater that I'm going to use. And it's a fairly thin grater. You don't want something thick. You want something that will basically pulverize the ginger root onto the fish. So I'll just do that now. I'm just going to do this, and it's kind of like snowing on the fish. Put a little snowing on the fish. Grating it on. All right, so we got the ginger done. That's the first step. Next thing we'll do is we'll take the dill, and we're going to cover. I'll show you this in a moment after I've done it. Get a little close up on it. Okay, so you'll see how much we have there. So it's kind of just covering it over. All right, we're with that. We'll use the same grater with my lemon. We're going to do a little bit of lemon zest now. Now usually, so things like lemon zest or any kind of acidic stuff, you want to, if you're doing a long cook, you don't want to put the lemon zest or any kind of acidic stuff on your food until later in the cooking process, because the effectiveness of the acid goes away and it can be bitter. But in this case, we're doing a fairly short cook. We're just doing a searing on the stove, and then it'll go in the oven for between 6 and 8 minutes, depending on the piece, the thickness of the salmon. So I've got a little bit of lemon. Let's put a little more in here. Okay, so that's the last part we're going to do before we sear it. We'll put the maple syrup on after the sear when we're prepared to put it in the oven. Okay, so let's go to the cooking. So the next step is we're going to sear the salmon. Here's our salmon on our cooking sheet, or on a baking sheet. And what we're going to do is we're going to sear them top side down first, because if you look at salmon, if you ever notice, it's sort of very delicate on the top, but when we sear it, this will kind of create a coating on top of the salmon, so that when we flip it over to the skin side, it won't sort of break it up and shrink it. So if you do skin side first, the skin is going to shrink a bit, and it'll kind of open the salmon up on the top, and it just won't look as nice as a sort of plain cohesive piece of salmon. So I'll show you that in a minute. So I've got the pan on right now, fairly high, like medium high. Put a tiny bit of olive oil in the middle here, and we're going to use butter as our main, butter and oil as our searing mediums. I'm not sure what they're called, but whatever the thing is that's going to help us do this. So I just like the buttery flavor. Very nice. So we'll do one at a time just so we can control the searing process. And I'm going to just do this one at a time, one in the middle. So presentation side down first. We'll do that. In the meantime, you're going to get a couple of instruments here. So we're going to use, to flip it, we're going to use two of these guys. So because one we'll use to flip, and the other we'll use to hold the salmon while we're flipping it. So we can do it very carefully and not sort of, get all disrupted. So we're gonna sear this for about, I'm going to say about 2.5 to 3 minutes, and then we'll flip it. So it's been about 2 to 3 minutes, and like I was saying, I'm going to put my wooden spoon here, and I'm going to just carefully flip it. So you'll see it has a bit of nice little sear on top. Not too dark. We don't want it to be crispy in a sense, but we want a good sear on the top, and then flip it over to the back end. Now the skin is going to sear. Again, another 2 to 3 minutes. You want the skin to brown for sure, right? Because you're heating it up so that the fat between the skin and the fillet is rendering, so that it bleeds into the fish. So we'll let that go for about 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, we've got the last piece, which is the thin piece. So this is the tail piece, right? So as I said, we want to cook this a little less than the other parts. So I'll give it no more than 45 seconds, maybe a minute on each side. Let me flip this guy. Just give it another minute on this side. So again, for the thinner piece, or if you have more than one thinner piece, then just cook it a little less, sear it a little less, because in the oven it'll continue cooking, and you don't want it to dry out while the other pieces are perfect. Okay, now we're going to take this last piece off. So take it off here, put it on the tray, and we'll take a look at what we're going to do on the tray. Okay, now I seem to have lost my basting brush, so we're just going to use a regular spatula like this, and we've got the maple syrup in a little container, a little jar like this. So I'm going to just wet that and basically do this sort of basting of the salmon with the maple syrup. Okay, so you don't want too much on here. You just want it to basically cover over. And now it's ready to go in the oven. So it's a really easy recipe. This will go in the oven for, again, 6 minutes at 350. Okay, I tried this at 6 minutes, like I said, and when I looked, I could just sort of feel that it was not quite ready yet. Let's take a look here. So I'm looking in here and I'm noticing, let me see if I can find one that I can show you guys. Okay, right here. So it's still a little bit jiggly on the inside. So I'd had it in for another 2 minutes, so 8 minutes. So now let's put it in another 2 minutes. We'll go to 10 minutes. So this is the thing, you've got to check it, because if the fish is cold when it goes in, a little colder, if it was room temperature, it might be okay at 6 or 8 minutes, but it looks like I need 10 minutes for this particular thickness of fish. Okay, so it ends up that after all of my prognosticating about how much time, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, anyway, it ends up it's 12 minutes to cook my salmon. So I think you have to check it every so often. Like I would start with 6 to 8 minutes if it's a certain thickness. It's hard to tell, right? But and then just check it along the way. So this took about 12 minutes. It's ready to go. Now the only thing I haven't done is added my salt. So this is about seasoning it to your liking. Some people like less salt, more salt. I'm a salty kind of guy, so I kind of like salt, but you know, I'm just gonna basically season it like that, and then I like to put a little squirt of lemon juice on top right at the end, so it gives it that nice tang. And there you go, you're ready to go. So here is your maple ginger salmon.